3 people have been killed in anti-government protests in Venezuela. An arrest warrant has been issued for the leader of the opposition in the wake of Wednesday's violence in Caracas. And in an address to the nation last night, President Nicolas Maduro says he's facing a coup attempt. He's ordered tougher security measures and a crackdown on media coverage of the protests. Adriana Hauser joins us now from CNN Miami with more on this story. Adriana, for viewers overseas who will remember the death of Hugo Chavez last spring, what has been happening in the transition that allowed Nicolas Maduro to come to power?
Hi, Fionnuala. Good to see you. Well, what we continue to see is a very divided country. As you mentioned before, students and members of the oppositions have taken the streets asking the government for a better quality of life. The students say they organized a non-violent protest, but as you said, at least three people have died and dozens have been injured and detained. And this, of course, during clashes between protesters, the police and gunmen. President Hugo Chavez died of cancer last April and Nicolas Maduro took over. And since then, Fionnuala, the quality of life in that country has kept declining. Crime is rampant. The Venezuelan Violence Observatory estimates that close to 25,000 killings occurred last year and inflation has reached 56%. We've also been reporting that there's shortages of basic goods, and Venezuelans have been struggling for months to find basic goods such as milk, cooking oil, toilet paper, and milk. The government has imposed price and exchange controls, and the central bank shortage index hit a record high at around 23%. So the country is in a really, really difficult situation, and what we see is a lot of looting, a lot of violence, a lot of vandalism. The main leaders of the opposition include, as you were mentioning, Leopoldo Lopez, and the government accused Lopez of organizing violent protests and has issued a warrant for his arrest. Before this, he had been threatened to be banned from holding public office. The government has also warned some private news organizations, Fionnuala, that if they broadcast the protests, they will be pulled off the air. And we saw that with the case of Spanish 24-hour news called NTN24. They were pulled off the air this week. And of course, both sides right now are blaming each other for the violence we're seeing. Fionnuala.
So how pivotal a moment is it now for the opposition, which has numerous leaders, but with the threat of the arrest of this main leader? Is this a defining movement? A moment in the movement, I should say.
Well, a lot of them seem to believe so. A lot of them seem to believe. A lot of opposition leaders passed through Miami. I've been in talks with them recently. They believe this is an intersection, and this could be a defining moment. But it all depends on whether or not they can continue fighting for their cause, and they're not either detained or put in jail for expressing their opinions. The government, of course, says that they're not just expressing an opinion or leading a political movement, but they're actually inciting violence, and that's the position of the government right now. So we'll have to see. These are very, very tense moments for Venezuela, and we just have to see what happens in the next few days, hopefully without a lot of blood on the streets. Fionnuala.
And a wider question about these opposition groups. I mean, how much broad support do they have among the population? We see the demonstrators out on the streets, we see the violence, but how many people are now completely anti-Chavez, the man who had built up this Venezuelan dream over the last 20 years or so, and how many have fallen away from that philosophy, political philosophy, and are concretely in the opposition camp? Is that known?
Well, what you're seeing, Fionnuala, is a very divided country. I mean, I would dare to say that there's a split down the middle, although electoral results from the electoral authorities do show more support for the government. However, opposition leaders say that those have been fraudulent results, that they've been altered, and that is not necessarily the case. You remember in the last presidential election, a lot of supporters of Enrique Capriles, who was the presidential candidate at the time, opposing Chavez, a lot of his supporters say that those results were altered and that he should have actually been in power right now.
All right, it is a fascinating story, and thank you indeed for highlighting it and the difficulties there on the ground. Adriana Hauser reporting to us from Miami.